Since the start of the Iran war, Shahed drones, among other types, have predictably emerged in massive numbers, flying at everything from military bases to hotels. Now, they're posing an increasing problem.
As we predicted in our Iranian air power review before the war, drones have become a serious hindrance, not necessarily due to tactical precision in combat, but due to the strain they put on everything in the vicinity, from civilians to air defense systems and so on. Tactically, these drones are not delivering decisive battlefield effects on their own. However, through persistent presence, infrastructure strikes, and sheer volume, they impose a disproportionate burden, forcing constant defensive responses and driving up costs. They are one of the weapons threatening ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They can be leveraged in swarms against bases, against government buildings, against civilian areas, and so on.
Most importantly, it costs more to stop them than to make them, and they are making a lot of them. Put simply, the Iranian drones are reaffirming what we've already started learning in the Ukraine war, namely, in an increasingly convoluted, unconventional battle space, drones are the future.
Since the start of the war in Iran, we have begun witnessing what major trade disruptions look like. As of late, oil and natural gas shortages are beginning to hit regions like Asia hard. China has announced export restrictions on refined oil products, with other Asian nations following suit. Many of these disruptions can be traced back to simple, easily deployable weapons. The Shahed drone is one such example. As of writing this, 2 US Marine amphibious ready groups are en route, the Boxer and the Tripoli, while Warthogs and Apaches have started direct engagements with Iranian assets in and around the Strait of Hormuz. The media predicts this force is being deployed to seize islands like Karg, although more realistically, it will establish beachheads along the southern Iranian coast to prevent direct access to the strait. There's just one problem. To guarantee safety, the drones have to be stopped entirely, but that might mean venturing further into Iran. And it is here that we see how problematic these cheap drones are, and how they will change the battle space in the future. The best place to start is the economic aspect. On paper, most of Iran's drones are fairly simple. Many, like the Shahed, use commercial off-the-shelf electronics. These are inexpensive, reliable, easier to manage logistically, and, as seen in the Ukraine war, they are straightforward to reverse engineer and can be upgraded with other parts if a supply line runs out. As such, scalability is easy. Just like FPV quadcopters in the Ukraine war, these larger fixed-wing systems currently serve multiple roles. Using the Strait of Hormuz as a relevant example, if we were to draw threat rings on a map, it becomes clear how much of a headache these systems can cause economically, capable of acting as area denial even from afar. To neutralize the threat to shipping, vast inland areas must be secured. But even then, because they are so small, these drones can still realistically appear anywhere, assembled and launched. Since we're dealing with civilians on ships, statistics don't hold much weight. Telling a tanker captain that his crew and vessel have only a 5% chance of being impacted, rather than 20%, isn't quite how it works, no matter how well that might sit with military personnel who are expecting threats either way. The remedy? They must be completely stopped. To exemplify just how much this may cost, even after just 3 weeks of the conflict, the Pentagon is already seeking a $200 billion supplemental. If approved, that would exceed total US funding allocated to Ukraine since 2022, highlighting how quickly a high-intensity conflict can scale in cost, even if it remains relatively short. This issue is becoming increasingly urgent as Iran dictates what sails through the Strait of Hormuz. To illustrate, here in Australia, we sit at the end of a long supply chain that runs from the Middle East into Asia and then to us. Unlike the West, most of Asia's oil is shipped through the Persian Gulf. Because of the closure, Asian countries like China have started restricting the export of refined oil products. While it's hard to say exactly what will happen, it could seriously impact us here in Australia. Similarly, liquid natural gas also ships through the Gulf. Western Europe, except for France, has tried to both shift away from Russian oil imports and avoid nuclear energy, now relying heavily on LNG for its energy needs. All of this pushes the direct economic impact of these cheap drones into the realm of billions of dollars globally, if not more, should this conflict persist. And this leads us to the tactical use of these cheap weapons. The main advantage of these drones, besides unit cost and scalability, is their pressure. Iran understands it can't win a direct kinetic conflict with America. They can't forward deploy troops into Iraq, Syria, or Israel, nor can they secure their own airspace. Instead, as we mentioned in our first video on Iran's air power, they depend on what is called forward defense, using long-range kinetic weapons to both block access inside the country and cause chaos on enemy positions abroad. Drones are a vital part of this strategy. The clear example is direct area denial, like in the Gulf, where, as mentioned earlier, the mere threat of employment is enough to cause significant logistical issues with shipping. Beyond this, the direct employment methods we are seeing include the use of drones against infrastructure, such as oil refineries. These are essentially nodes that depend on high-precision equipment. If any of this is damaged, even by loose area effect explosions, it is effectively inoperable until repairs are carried out. The same applies to energy infrastructure, something that Iran is now threatening to strike if the US targets Iranian power plants. Again, because they are large, complex, and serve as critical nodes in broader systems, they are vulnerable to even low-precision drone systems, leading to chaos. Finally, whether it is intentional or not, this method has so far resulted in relatively few human casualties, especially compared to coalition airstrikes on Iran itself. This appears to be working in Iran's favor politically. In all cases, drones like the Shahed depend on area denial or threats to critical infrastructure. This pressures the US to respond by establishing defenses, prolonging the conflict, and imposing economic repercussions on other nations. Although the general attrition tactics themselves are nothing new in warfare, it is the price disparity that makes this such an intriguing case study. Cheaper weapons, made more quickly and easily, and capable of being smuggled to other forces or reverse engineered.
This isn't just happening in Iran or Ukraine. These systems are quickly appearing everywhere. The Houthis in Yemen have access to similar drones. And as of this recording, they are not yet directly involved, but if they join the conflict, they could block shipping through the Bab al-Mandab Strait, another critical choke point. The trend here is ease of use and affordability, and that leads to the next issue, the cost of countermeasures.
A few weeks into the war, several outlets reported that Iran had managed to establish new drone production lines with backup plans if they were destroyed. Assuming these reports are accurate, this suggests that the US must accept that drones will keep appearing. What's more, if US soldiers are deployed into Iran, it is possible that we could see conventional quadcopters used by the Iranians, like in Ukraine, alongside these longer-range systems. Once again, it is the act of scaling up attritional endurance simply by using cheap, relatively unadvanced systems to wreak havoc on the opposing force that Iran is counting on. As with everything, if the tech is rolled out, there needs to be a system to directly counter it. While the US arguably has the most precise intercept systems in the world, they aren't cheap or easy to scale up. These two issues, cost and scalability, are what Ukraine and Russia have had to work around. The result is simpler systems, less precise but cheaper, easier to mass produce and simple enough for any young soldier to learn, enabling similar scalability in response to the threat. Ideally, the countermeasure system should be cheaper than the standoff weapon, or at least have a faster replenishment rate. If the US force can't achieve its objectives within a clear timeline, then this replenishment rate will become more important in an attritional standoff, as we see in Ukraine. Fixed-wing drones like the Shahed and their equivalents used by Ukraine and Russia are essentially force equalizers. While smaller militaries or militia groups have always devised inventive ways to wage asymmetric warfare, what we're witnessing today is undeniably a game-changer in the truest sense. It introduces a new dynamic on the battlefield that previously didn't exist. In previous videos about the Ukraine war, we discussed how flashy tech, like F-16s and Javelin missiles, pales in comparison to the more basic essentials, mainly artillery shells and mines. Neither Ukraine nor Russia can do without them. Drones also fall into that second category. They are not niche weapons, but now standard essentials for scouting, striking, relaying signals, and similar tasks. Likewise, countermeasures against drones are becoming just as crucial. On a final note, it is also possible that we are witnessing a US strategy, calculated to allow a momentary closure of the strait as a method of leverage. A situation that could compel both the Gulf states and Western Europe to support the conflict in some capacity. This speculation holds some weight in the decision to constrain an overwhelming first strike in favor of what General Kane referred to as a ramp-up approach. Regardless, the drone threat is present either way, and all eyes are on the US Marines and airborne units, who are likely prepared to encounter similar unmanned systems in Iran, if not employing drones themselves. While the Ukraine war first highlighted how necessary drones are in a near-peer conflict, the Iran war has shown that even against a superior force, drones can be used to great effect. Realistically, the drone isn't going to win wars on its own. In fact, much of the commentary on the Shahed appears to overestimate its capabilities. Contrary to much speculation, these drones aren't significantly undermining US and Israeli power, but are instead causing a major headache, making the situation uncomfortable, prolonging the conflict to drain US resources, and perhaps forcing some sort of resolution to the fighting. In other words, although these weapons, such as ballistic missile systems, don't secure military victories for the IRGC, they are employed to influence trade and energy. With public opinion on the war already split, this particular approach truly matters a lot. By using similar attrition tactics and political maneuvers as the Iranians, the North Vietnamese army eventually forced a US withdrawal without actually winning any major battles against American forces directly.
The US and its partners are now looking to Ukraine's battlefield-developed drone interceptors as a potential solution. Regardless of the politics surrounding the Iran war, it's clear that drones are here to stay. They're likely to be in every conflict from now on, and the best response is to adapt. The Australian Defence Force will need to develop its own affordable, simple and streamlined drone interceptor system. We must assume that if we go to war, the enemy will deploy fixed-wing drones and quadcopters in huge numbers. Will we be ready for that?
Thanks for watching. Our videos are researched, written and produced by a small team of filmmakers dedicated to bringing you accurate military aviation history from around the world. Please consider supporting us by joining our merch and members site for early access, bonus content and merch discounts. Or become a YouTube channel member for early access, or simply hit subscribe. Your support means everything.